Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. My guest today is Dr. Liam Captain Snowdon, who most simply know as Captain. Captain is a somatic sex educator, anti-violence worker, and poet who lives uninvited on the territory of the Lekwungen and WSÁNEĆ peoples on Vancouver Island, Canada. In our conversation, we talk about the intersection of sexuality and spirituality and ways to heal that divide. We also talk about the power of personal, embodied, and erotic education and the importance of knowing that all desire is beautiful. Hi, Captain. Welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to chat with you today, and I wanted to jump right in and ask you a question about something that I read on your bio that I thought was a little fun and quirky that I thought our listeners might enjoy, which is that you said that you used to be a server in a high-end cafeteria and wore a cream and gold tuxedo wearing a gold banana clip. And I'm curious to hear more about that experience and how you made the transition, however fast or slow it was, from that to working in the field of sex and eroticism and bodywork.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing I haven't thought of for a while. And I wonder what bio that's on. That's so interesting. I worked in this trippy place that was both like a high-end restaurant and a high-end cafeteria, just divided by one glass wall. And the uniform I had to wear was a cream tuxedo with a gold cummerbund and I had a gold banana clip in my hair, sort of picture sort of 90s hair. And then gold lame high heels. And it was an uncomfortable but kind of fun outfit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so, that I think that little snapshot is a good picture for actually my whole life. But let's see, that was in the 90s, and I was trying to figure out who and what I wanted to be in the world, around gender, around work, around sexuality, around all kinds of things. And I think it was really shortly after that I started doing some volunteer work with the homeless youth community in Victoria, BC here. And that sort of sparked the rest of my life and the rest of my desires to work with people and folks on the margins. And so I think I went from this really frontline street harm reduction work with youth to, some of my queerness informing my interest in like sexual health and working in gay and queer men's health. And then at one point I was, what are the two, I'm like, what next? What do I want to do? What are the things that could keep me excited, for a good chunk of the rest of my life? And I was like, sex and spirit. And I thought, do I want to go to divinity school? And I wasn't, I thought about that. And then I was like, no, sex really actually keeps my attention. I wish there was somewhere I could have gone and studied both. So I ended up in San Francisco studying sex, and it all just kind of went from there.
Uh-huh.
That's how we met.
Exactly. Yeah. So I heard you say sex and spirit, and it sounds like you see like there's significant connection there. And I'm wondering if you could say more about how you see that connection, because a lot of people don't see that connection at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that aren't connected at all right now. So thanks for asking that. Like I like to see like community and sex and spirit all connected in together. Yeah. I feel super excited about, the wholeness that's included in some of the best versions of spirituality that brings like all the parts of ourselves together, and really interested in spirituality that doesn't sort of transcend the body, but that brings us into the body and has the body as this sort of central space for spirit and central space for connecting with each other in community. And then, adding sex and sexuality to that picture, or bringing it through spirituality where I feel like it really already is, and seeing how that is a place for healing for all of us. And, times that I've like delved into that work and done that work with folks, the most common thing that I hear is like, oh, I sort of feel like this is something I've done before, or this is what we're supposed to do, or this is like one of the ways that we were made to heal each other. So those are some of the intersections I get pretty excited about.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think about, especially what I hear clients and other people talk about is the way in which the religion or the spiritual community in which they grew up in, there's a way of not being in the body at all. And it's all about being in the head, or not even being in the head part of the body. And I wonder if that's something that is part of the work that you do with people in the sexological body work, in terms of getting people back in their body and maybe learning or having the experience of being a spiritual being in a body, and then the connection to sex that way too.
Absolutely. It feels, I mostly work with groups now in my somatic sex education and sexological bodywork practice. What I see happen again and again is that people are releasing shame that's come from certain institutions of religion, and then discovering a spirituality that comes like through them and through their own body. So something that's not layered over them, but comes through. And that's where I see people really find a lot of healing around that piece.
And I know something else that you've said that you're working with a lot right now is anti-oppression work. And I've also heard you talk about this idea of decolonizing the body. So I wonder if you can say more about that. And I can also see how people's experience of religion may tie into that too, in terms of the oppression of religion and the depression of sexuality within religion or some spiritual communities.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, and I really want to acknowledge that anything that I have to say about decolonization or of anti-oppression work, I've learned from Indigenous folks and people of color. And so it's not, none of my things that come out of my mouth are original thoughts. I've been really honored to have some fantastic teachers and continue to. For me, I'm really interested in engaging in seeing what I'm not seeing. So, working around the body and in community where I can still keep myself and others in their own sort of learning zone, but at the same time be in a place of discomfort, which is often that place of learning, right? And so I'm really deeply curious about finding out how traumas and oppressions like land and stay in the body, and beyond, once people have done, talk therapy or whatever piece of the work is that has had folks telling the story. And sometimes, folks are just really done having to tell their story over and over again. Like, how are things still in the body, and how we can find ways to work through those and release those things, in community that helps us avoid the isolation that sometimes happens with being oppressed, and finding ways to be, even if we need to be alone, like being alone in ways together. So for me, I think there's a piece in here about decolonizing that's about all of us, because, all the body image crap that we put up with from the media, and like all the forces that are coming down on us are forces of colonization. And I think the number one thing that we can do is learn how to say no, and also respect each other's no's and celebrate each other's no's. And because any work that we're doing around consent that's not deeply rooted in anti-colonial work and recognition that, most of us are living on land that was taken. And so consent was never here. So everything we try to do around consent is a piece of the work, but we really have to work on supporting Indigenous land claims and fighting pipelines and all these important things that are as important as working on, sort of our individual healing journey.
And I wonder if you can share with us a little bit more about how you've worked with communities or groups and helping people be in their body and do this work.
Yeah, sure. Some of the parts that are exciting me these days are thinking about being embodiment activist, taking our skills that we've learned around embodiment and what it's like to be in our bodies, the hard parts, the good parts, the ecstatic parts, and bringing that to the activism piece. And one of the things that excites me the most around that is getting into groups of people and having us practice the things that get us activated, whether it's whether it's dealing with stuff that's come up really clearly and really acutely in the Me Too movement around, having hard conversations with each other about us doing sexual harm to each other. How can we practice and train our nervous systems to be able to be present for those conversations and actually hear what people have to say to us about how we've done harm. So like the actual like practicing in low pressure situations, it's, you know, some of the same work as people training people or supporting people in being able to speak their desires in low pressure situations in order to be able to speak them in more like when they're in front of someone or a couple of people who they're interested in doing something fun or kinky or sexy with it. It's like, how do we learn how to show up for difficult conversations and actually hear people?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the Me Too movement, because I was thinking about that as you were talking, and I'm just curious if you've seen an uptick in awareness or people more interested in doing this work since the Me Too movement has gained momentum in the last year.
Absolutely, yeah. And I work at the local university here for the Anti-Violence Project, helping to run the men's circle and working with folks who've caused harm. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more people being told that their behavior has been harmful. And there's more people coming in saying, I think I've caused harm, which is fantastic. You know, it's like, and sort of coming of their own volition and saying, I think I've done something wrong. And also, of course, more because the more it gets talked about, the more folks are triggered around their own past experiences of harm. And so lots more folks coming in and needing support around past, present, and present stuff.
Another thing you just mentioned was about desire. And I want to share that when I first met you at a retreat, that you were facilitating a group that I was in with you. And one of the exercises that you had us do every day was I can't remember if you had us say it to other people in the group or you had us hold up a mirror and say it to ourselves. I think it was the mirror, where everyone in the group had to hold up a mirror one at a time, share the mirror and go in a circle and look in the mirror and say to ourselves, your desire is beautiful. And that really had significant impact on me in many ways and continues to. And I bring that idea of cultivating that into my work with my own clients. And I'm just curious, like, if you want to say more about that or about that exercise and the way that you've seen that work for you or other people.
Well, that's beautiful. Thanks for saying that, Nick. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I get excited about us being able to meet our own desires with just gratitude. You know, it's like, it's a thing to have a desire in these cultures that we live in this overculture, period. And then it's a thing to say it to someone else. And I think so often these days, some of the really conversations that are really, really complex are getting shortened. And, you know, I walk around sometimes and I think, is desire period now seen as dangerous? And that gives me great concern. So yeah, I try to bring in these pieces around telling ourselves that our desires are beautiful, practicing meeting each other in desires and just saying thank you and not expecting that if someone has a desire that's to do that we're involved in, that there's anything we have to do about that. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, being a practitioner from, you know, a therapist to a massage therapist to whatever kind of practitioners, like if in those situations where clients have desires about us that are beyond our boundaries, how we can just celebrate the desire that folks are having and then reinforce the boundaries. It's like so often people's desires get shut down. So yeah, I just get really excited about it's like, yeah, your desires are beautiful. There's nothing else that needs to happen after that. Just having a desire is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think what's hard for people is that they think that there's an expectation that once we state our desire, that it's then going to be met or that it's going to be rejected, hence we will be rejected. And so people feel afraid of like, I don't want to express my desire because I'll be rejected, or I don't want the other person to express their desire because then I'm going to have to say no. I might want to say no to that if I don't want to do that thing, when it's important to say, okay, well, I want this thing, you know, particularly in a romantic or intimate or sexual context, and the person feels like I have to say yes to that. But you know, if we go to someone's house and they say, oh, do you have red wine? And they say, no, I only have white wine. People don't get bent out of shape about that, right?
Totally.
Or, you know, I don't have gluten-free bread, sorry. But, okay, well, then I'll have tortilla chips,
Totally. I just think there's just a lot of white supremacy culture, like in all that stuff in there. There's just that like either or thinking, like good people answer other, take care of other people's desires, bad people, and all the sort of politeness of I can't say no to people. As children, many of us are brought up to not say no and to put up with, kissing Aunt Aunt Elsie or whoever, and not given any autonomy around our bodies. So much in there.
Yeah. So speaking about our bodies and relating to other people, another thing that I heard you say on another interview was you were talking about this idea of, especially in the trainings that you do with people around their bodies and sexuality, that it's really important for us to get to know our bodies better before we hand our body over to another person. And the analogy you gave was like our body was like a car, and we don't just give our keys to another person to drive before we know how to drive it ourselves. And I really liked that idea. And I wonder if you could say more about how you work with that or train people around that.
Sure. And I might want to throw out the car analogy, but like maybe a pogo stick or like a bicycle or something. I don't know.
Something less dangerous.
Something less dangerous, but also something like that doesn't run on oil. But yeah,
a bicycle.
A bicycle, yeah. And I just think that it's something that we don't generally hand over things that are precious to us, other people, without having a conversation first. And so what I think I was trying to get at there is just like finding out, creating cultures and creating events and creating ways of relating to each other that really encourage us to find out. It might not be first, in this culture, there's probably lots of people will end up doing a lot of partner connection before they explore any other kinds of sex, like solo sex or erotic trance or role play stuff. I think but so really, like at some point in our lives, finding out how we experience pleasure in our own bodies and doing some like really deep somatic research about that, and hopefully from a place of fun and joy, and it doesn't always have to be alone either, right? I think that like communal erotic solo experiences is something that I wish we had a lot more of in culture. And then when we're ready to like share our desires or bodies with other folks, we have more information to give them, and we can really pop that silly Disney balloon of, if you love me, you'd know how to touch me and give me pleasure, all that stuff. So I also, and keep like coming back to our bodies and what we might experience with pleasure. Because of course we change over time, over age. And also, I don't know how many times I've been like, oh, what's that thing those people are doing over there? It's kind of weird. I don't know if I want to watch them do that. And then been like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that thing. I wonder if there's someone I can find to do that with. So like, just the expansion of curiosity and desire and what we're exposed to.
So you just said a phrase that I think could use a little bit unpacking, maybe.
Okay, good.
Which was, you said somatic exploration, I think, or somatic education or something. I forget exactly what you said, but it was about people doing their own somatic education, like learning more about their body. And I wonder if you could say more about that for people who may not know exactly what that is and how they go about doing that.
Sure. And I think there's sort of probably as many ways to do that as there are people. And by somatic, I mean, soma, like of the body. So, researching, like bringing curiosity to our own bodies, even like part of the curiosity that many of us bring to other people's bodies, if we could bring some of that to our own pleasure. I think when we're talking about the work that I'm involved in, teaching sexological bodywork, which is a profession that was started by Joseph Kramer and a bunch of folks in San Francisco as a response and a way to find love and caring in the gay men's community around the AIDS crisis, so they could find ways to, touch each other and be in community when there was this, we don't know what's going on, what's happening with people's bodies. And so there's a really strong queer lineage of erotic touch in community and of finding ways to notice the habits that we've developed around pleasure and self-pleasuring and, expanding out from there. And then I think over the last number of years, I kind of visualize it as like there's this basket that the sexological bodywork. And then those of us who started teaching it after, of course, kept putting things in the basket. And then over the last couple of years, the basket just kind of burst. And so myself and Kath and Jesse and Corinne Diachuk have sort of expanded the program to talk about somatic sex education. So we teach people to teach other people about sex through their bodies. And part of that is hands-on work. And so that plugging into practitioners that do that kind of work, there's all kinds of doors for folks to go into depending on what their particular interests are. I think it's, as humans that are capable of a lot of pleasure and not necessarily have to be interested in pleasure with other people, it's one of life's real joys to explore what's possible and ways into spirit. So I think I get excited about that. That, there's a million ways to kneel and kiss the ground. One of them is through sex.
Yeah. And you also mentioned communal erotic experiences, and I wonder if you could maybe give people a snapshot of what some of those things might look like.
Yeah, so there is more communities than I know that have their own practices of self-pleasuring in the same space. And the one I'm most familiar with is something that we've had lots of different names for. Some people call it orgasmic yoga, and it doesn't need to be either orgasmic or yoga. Most commonly, I think now we talk about it as communal erotic practice. And what it involves is folks spending an hour with an overlay of a playlist in a circle, everybody in their own little space, having our own kind of little nest and some guidelines around the ways that we stay in our own energy and stay in keeping our gazes very soft into ourselves as a way of seeing what's possible when we bring our eroticism to community that's not physically engaging with each other, but the erotic energy is in the room and in the space, seeing how that can transform and seems to move shame pretty quickly out of the space. That's one of the modalities that I'm particularly interested in. And it's not like, I don't know anybody who's developed it into like 4 or 5 courses a day on the corner, bring your yoga mat, drop in with people you've never met kind of thing. There's a lot more sort of ahead, planning ahead and folks meeting each other and some transitions to it. But
Yeah, great. Yeah, I just wanted to flesh it out a little bit more for people who might have been a little mystified or curious about what that is. Captain, can you share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish?
I think my answer to that. Today's answer to that is like a mashup between the radical faery community on the west coast of both of these countries that are fake with a line in the middle of them. So yeah, radical faery practice, especially in groups, at gatherings, celebrating the high pagan holidays. And I'm especially thinking of communities that have like kept the radical in the faery, that are, invested in change and resolving conflict with each other and living life in that way. And then I probably a big shout out to Joseph Kramer with Sexological Bodywork and bringing me into the practice and learning about communal erotic experience and passing on some tools.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Captain, how can people find you and find more about your work and what you're up to? Yeah.
So I have a website, which is www.captainsnowdon, snowdon.ca. And the Somatic Sex Education website is www.somaticsexeducator.com. Those are some of the places. I'm happy to receive emails. Liam@captainsnowdon.com. Yeah.
Okay, great. And we'll have all of those resources for people on the show notes on the website so they can access it there too. Well, thank you for being here. I really enjoyed chatting with you and hearing more about your work and spreading the good word about erotic education.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Nick.
Yeah.
Yay.
To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.